Let me ask you something. In your personal opinion, when rewatching a show that you used to really enjoy as a child, now being a full-grown adult, what do you think might be the main problem? A number of things can come to mind. In my personal opinion, it's always the issue of disappointment. Throughout our daily lives, we always deal with disappointment, at least like perhaps once or twice a week, who knows. But when it comes to things that we hold close to our heart, mainly our childhood, disappointment becomes a far greater issue. Now, if you're an adult rewatching a certain show that you used to enjoy as a child and just rewatching like one or two episodes for the fun of it, it's not such a big deal. But if you're someone like me who has to rewatch an entire show for the sake of reviewing it, disappointment can become quite annoying. So with that being the case, I wonder, how well does the anime Digimon hold up? Digimon was a show that I used to really enjoy as a child, and I came to question, how does it hold up? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today, a review of the anime Digimon's first season. A full disclosure before I really get into it, I have not seen the Japanese version of the show. I've only ever watched the English adaptation and the Dutch adaptation of the show. As such, I can't really mention any kind of changes made between the English and the Japanese version, or the Dutch and Japanese version for that matter. So, with all that said, let's get into it. Digimon starts off introducing our group of heroes by the name of Tai, the leader of the group and protagonist of the show, Matt, Tai's, I suppose you could say, rival and from time to time best friend, Joe, our kind of clumsy and very careful uh, nerd-like guy. We have Izzy, the fan favorite and computer nerd of the show. We have Sora, the, well, kind of loving and caring girl. We have Mimi, the really disappointing, very annoying girl, to be honest. We have TK, Matt's little brother. And we have my personal favorite, a cute and innocent Kari, who is Ty's little sister, who is joined later in the show. It starts off with our main characters just having fun at summer camp, just doing whatever you should do at summer camp, which is basically just relaxing and having fun, playing with your friends and all that sort of stuff. And they're doing this while the rest of the world is being terrorized by very odd weather. Rainforests are completely drying up and desert areas are being completely flooded. And it doesn't take long before this very odd weather reaches our group of heroes in the form of a snowstorm in the middle of summer. And as the snowstorm passes and our group of heroes goes to play in the snow, they see Aurora Borealis in the sky, the northern lights. And from the northern lights fall devices that land in the hands of our group of heroes as these devices now activate in their hands and drag them into a different world. And that pretty much is the start of it all. That's the first episode. Throughout the first few episodes, they are joined by a group of strange looking little monsters called Digimon, and they are trying to figure out exactly what happened and how the hell they ended up getting into the digital world, as they are now in the digital world and they have no idea how they got there. And as they try to figure everything out, they end up finding out that a great evil is threatening both the digital world and as a result also the human world, because these two worlds are connected with each other thanks to the World Wide Web. Now, the story in and out of itself is a fairly enjoyable story. It's your basic, everyday, you know, save the world type ordeal. It's just pretty much that. And that is perfectly fine, because as a child, that was always really enjoyable to watch. Honestly, if there is any kind of problem I have with the story, it's the fact that there are multiple villains. Now that itself isn't really a problem, but the problem that I have is that every single time that a villain is defeated, a new villain all of a sudden comes out of nowhere and just shows up. There is very little to no foreshadowing of these villains being there and being the main evil that they now have to defeat. But because of that, it always kind of feels as if the show is somewhat disjoining. Pretty much what you end up getting is a disconnected show where there is never really any real connection to any kind of other villain until the very last moment when the villain is defeated. And this pretty much means that some plot device or plot point is being thrown out there to tell these group of heroes that there is another villain that they need to take care of. Honestly, I always kind of felt that that was kind of annoying. I remember thinking to myself as a child when I saw the first villain being defeated, I thought to myself, well, this is kind of the end of the show, right? It's all over now. The villain is defeated, the kids can go home, it's all fine. But then, of course, a new villain was introduced very quickly. That was the only problem that I really ever had with the story, and overall speaking, you know, it's not that bad. There are some things that I didn't like about it, because it kind of felt like the story had like 5 different endings, only one of those being the actual real ending to it all. But other than that, you know, not a real big deal. Now let's talk a little bit about the characters. Every character in the show pretty much is established straight from the start exactly what they are and how they're going to do it. Their character traits never really change throughout the show, and they pretty much stay exactly the same every single time, which I actually kind of enjoyed. Usually I would find it somewhat annoying that characters tend to stay exactly the same, but honestly I kind of felt like it worked here. Mainly because, you know, as a child, I'm trying to talk as a child of course, as a child it kind of made me feel safe knowing exactly what these characters are going to be like and exactly how everything is going to turn out. Now, this is not to say that there is never any real character development. There is. I mean, you're dealing with a group of people that are now supposed to work together in order to figure out exactly what happened and how they're supposed to get back home. And this pretty much means that you're going to have conflicts, which is, you know, normal. If you deal with a group of people working together, you're not always going to be exactly on one line. And this pretty much means that conflict is pretty much inevitable. And that is kind of good. I always felt like the conflicts were done kind of odd, but overall speaking, fairly well. Now, each character, like I said, has their own little character trait that is completely familiar and you know exactly what's going to happen. So that's all very safe ground and it works just fine. Now, the animation of the show is a fun little thing. Remember, this show first came out in the late 90s, and for that time, and even still to this day, I think the animation holds up pretty darn well. Aside from some somewhat terrible, not really terrible, somewhat, you know, there was this 3D animation effect that they used during the higher tier Digivolutions of their Digimon. And this 3D effect, I've kind of felt like it didn't really work. It seemed always kind of bad. And of course the animation doesn't really hold up to the standards that we have today, but for the most part the animation holds up surprisingly well. One thing I didn't really like though was the show's opening. Let's just say that the song used in the opening hasn't really aged all that well. It kinda, let's just say, is just not good anymore. I didn't really like the opening song, but that could be my own personal preference, but honestly it kinda felt like a weak song. Now the show was a fairly enjoyable show, definitely. I've had a lot of fun rewatching the show, and honestly, that is really all that mattered. So, all things considered, in the end, how does the show hold up? Well, honestly, surprisingly well. The show brings a fun and interesting, enjoyable story to watch with interesting and fun characters, and the only problems that I have, that's actually something I should quickly mention, the jokes in the show. They're terrible. Pretty much terrible. There are puns in this show that are just so unfunny, and this pretty much is like for every pun that they have in the show. Every joke feels so forced and unfunny. And I even felt like this when I was a child, let alone now that I'm an adult and rewatching this, and I was just like, good God, that is just so unfunny. But honestly, that's a minor complaint that was kind of annoying because the comedy was supposed to kind of relieve everything and just make everything seem a bit more lighthearted, I guess. And I guess in that way it didn't really work, but for the most part it was alright. The show holds up surprisingly well. There are a few slight problems that I have with it, such as the soundtrack and the kind of disconnected story, but for the most part the show delivers a fun and enjoyable experience that is, for someone like me who used to enjoy the show as a child, quite enjoyable to say the least. If you're a child today, if you're like, let's say, 7 to 10 years old today and you're thinking about watching something, I suggest watch Digimon. Who knows, maybe someday you'll be sitting in front of a camera talking to that generation of children how enjoyable the show was for you. And if you're an adult right now who used to enjoy the show back then, you know what? Why not give it another try? You might just find something that you liked. Overall, I'm going to give the show a 7 out of 10. It was an enjoyable watch. I had a lot of fun with it, just reliving memories. And maybe I'm being a little too soft on it due to, nostalgic reasons and all that sort of stuff. But for the most part, I really enjoyed it. So, with all of that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I am going to start watching Hunter x Hunters next to do arc reviews on this particular show, so look out for or watch for that and hope you'll enjoy that. And until next time, see you later. Bye.